I opened my eyes, and I was lying in my gay best friend's bed. I couldn't remember a single thing. For a few endless seconds, I just stared at the white ceiling, listening to the steady hum of an air conditioner and the faint clatter of dishes coming from somewhere beyond the bedroom door. My head pounded with the dull ache of the worst hangover I had ever experienced. My mouth felt dry, my thoughts refused to connect, and every attempt to replay the previous night dissolved into scattered flashes of colored lights, loud music, laughter, and then nothing. Absolutely nothing. My heart started racing. Why was I here? Why couldn't I remember how I'd gotten here? I pushed myself upright too quickly and instantly regretted it as the room tilted. The comforter slid from my shoulders. I looked down in panic. I was wearing a clean t-shirt and a pair of gray sweatpants that definitely didn't belong to me. My own clothes were nowhere in sight. 1,000 awful possibilities rushed through my mind before logic had any chance to catch up. Just then, I heard footsteps approaching. The bedroom door eased open, and Noah stood there holding a steaming mug in one hand and a bottle of water in the other. He looked exactly like he always did, calm, neat, and impossible to read. His dark blonde hair was still damp from a shower, and he gave me the same gentle smile I'd seen countless times over the last 7 years. "You're awake," he said quietly. "I was hoping you'd sleep another hour." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He walked over without hesitation, set the water on the nightstand beside me, then placed the mug next to it. "Chamomile tea," he said. "Your stomach probably won't appreciate coffee right now." I stared at him. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look guilty. He simply looked concerned. That somehow made everything even more confusing. "What happened?" I finally managed to ask. Noah rubbed the back of his neck before answering. "You drank way too much at Olivia's birthday party. That's all." He nodded once. "That's all." His answer should have comforted me, but instead it left an uncomfortable silence hanging between us. It sounded too simple. Too incomplete. I searched his face, waiting for him to explain why I had woken up in his bed wearing someone else's clothes, but he only glanced toward the kitchen. "Drink some water first," he said. "You'll feel better." "Noah." My voice stopped him halfway to the door. Did something happen? For the first time since he'd walked in, his expression shifted. Not fear, not embarrassment, just a quiet sadness that disappeared almost as quickly as it came. "You don't remember anything?" he asked. I shook my head. Nothing after the second round of drinks. He looked down for a second before meeting my eyes again. "Then don't force yourself to remember yet." That answer only made my pulse climb higher. If nothing unusual had happened, why avoid the question? Why wouldn't he simply tell me everything? Noah reached into his pocket and held out my phone. It was fully charged. "It kept buzzing all morning," he said. "I figured you'd want it when you woke up." As soon as I unlocked the screen, dozens of notifications flooded in. Group chat messages, missed calls, memes, a blurry photo someone had taken at the party. My thumb stopped over one message from our friend Tyler that read, "Dude, I seriously can't believe last night." Before I could open it, Noah spoke from the doorway without turning around. "Eat something before you read those." Then he quietly walked away. I sat frozen on the edge of his bed, the tea cooling beside me, my phone trembling slightly in my hand. I couldn't remember the party. I couldn't remember coming here. I couldn't remember changing clothes. And for some reason, the one person I trusted more than anyone else seemed determined to protect me from a memory I no longer had. By the time I finished half the mug of tea, the pounding in my head had eased just enough for curiosity to overpower the nausea. I opened Tyler's message first. "Dude, I seriously cannot believe last night." Beneath it were 6 laughing emojis, followed by another text. "You owe Noah your life." Before I could reply, another message appeared from Olivia. "Please tell me you are alive. I almost called an ambulance when you disappeared." I frowned. Disappeared? My memory still refused to cooperate. I scrolled farther through the group chat. There were dozens of photos from the party. People smiling around the fire pit. Someone dancing on the patio. Tyler attempting to grill burgers at nearly midnight. Then I found the last picture anyone had posted. It showed me leaning heavily against Noah outside the house, while he steadied me with one arm around my shoulders. My face was hidden, but it was obvious I could barely stand. The comments underneath only deepened my confusion. Somebody wrote, "True friendship right there." Another joked, "Noah deserves a medal for babysitting Ethan every weekend." Then Tyler added, "I have never seen Ethan that drunk before." Still, Something about the messages felt unfinished. They all hinted at a story nobody was actually telling. I finally walked into Noah's kitchen. He was quietly scrambling eggs while a loaf of sourdough toasted nearby. His apartment looked exactly as it always had, spotless, organized, almost impossibly peaceful. My sneakers sat neatly beside the front door. My jacket had been folded over a chair. Even my wallet and keys rested in a small ceramic bowl on the counter. Everything about the apartment suggested care, not chaos. Noah glanced up when he heard me. "Feeling any better?" he asked. "A little." I hesitated before pulling out a chair. "Everyone keeps acting strange." He slid a plate toward me. "Eat first." "You keep saying that instead of answering me." He sighed softly, not in frustration, but in patience. "Because your stomach matters more than your imagination right now." That answer irritated me more than I wanted to admit. I picked up my fork, but barely touched the food. Did I embarrass myself? Noah smiled faintly. "You apologized to a mailbox." I blinked. "What? You thought it was somebody's grandmother." Despite myself, I laughed. It sounded ridiculous enough to be believable. Seriously? Very seriously. For the first time all morning, the tension eased between us. But it lasted only a few seconds before another thought surfaced. "Is that all?" Noah looked at me for a long moment. "You were exhausted, Ethan. You drank more than your body could handle. You needed help. Getting home. That is the only part that matters." Again, it felt like he had answered without actually answering. My phone buzzed once more. This time it was Tyler calling. I stepped onto Noah's small balcony to answer. Tyler greeted me with a dramatic groan. "Look who finally survived." "Apparently. How is your husband?" I frowned. "What are you talking about?" Tyler burst into laughter. "Relax. It is a joke. It is not funny. Come on, man. You practically would not let Noah out of your sight last night." Before I could ask what he meant, Tyler continued in a lighter tone. "Honestly, though, thank goodness he got you home. Nobody else could have handled you." The call ended a few minutes later, but one sentence refused to leave my mind. "You practically would not let Noah out of your sight." I looked back through the balcony window. Noah was washing dishes with his sleeves rolled to his elbows, quietly humming to himself as though nothing unusual had happened. If all he had done was take care of a drunk friend, why did everyone keep smiling like they knew a secret? And why did Noah, the most honest person I had ever known, seem determined to let my missing memories stay exactly where they were? The following Monday felt strangely unfamiliar, even though nothing around me had changed. The same office lobby smelled like fresh coffee, the same elevator played the same forgettable music, and the same coworkers greeted me with cheerful smiles. Yet every time my phone vibrated, I found myself wondering whether another message about Saturday night would appear. It never did. Instead, the silence somehow became even heavier. Around noon, Noah texted me exactly as he always had. Lunch. There was nothing unusual about it. Every Monday for nearly 3 years, we had walked 3 blocks to the same little sandwich shop across from the park. We knew the owner by name. We always argued about baseball, complained about work, and split an order of onion rings that neither of us needed. I stared at the message for almost a full minute before typing a reply. "Sorry. Busy today." It was a lie. I was not busy. I simply did not know how to sit across from him without wondering what had happened during the missing hours of my life. A few seconds later, his response arrived. "No problem. Maybe next week." No guilt. No questions. No pressure. Somehow, that kindness made me feel worse. The days that followed settled into an uncomfortable routine. Noah still sent me funny videos, still remembered to ask how my presentations were going, and still reminded me whenever my favorite basketball team had a game. I answered every message, but my replies became shorter. Instead of conversations, we exchanged polite sentences. Instead of phone calls, we sent quick reactions. The friendship that had once felt effortless now required conscious effort from both of us. At first, I convinced myself I was only giving my memory time to return. Then I started noticing little things. Noah stopped dropping by my apartment after work. He no longer asked whether I wanted to watch movies on Friday nights. He stopped leaving an extra cup of coffee on my desk whenever he happened to be in my building for meetings. He was not angry. He was simply giving me space. One Friday evening, Tyler invited several of us to watch a baseball game at a neighborhood sports bar. Noah was already there when I arrived. He looked up, smiled warmly, and waved me over. For a split second, everything almost felt normal again. Then someone at the table grinned and said, "Hey Ethan, planning to drink water tonight?" Everyone laughed. I forced a smile. Noah quietly changed the subject before anyone could continue. He did it so naturally that nobody else seemed to notice. I noticed. Throughout the evening, I caught myself watching him more than the game playing on the television screens. He laughed at everyone else's jokes, asked about Olivia's new apartment, congratulated Tyler on his promotion, and somehow never once brought up that Saturday night. It was as if he had quietly locked the entire memory away and thrown away the key. On my walk home, the guilt settled deeper inside me. 7 years. That was how long Noah had been my closest friend. He had stood beside me after my parents' divorce. He had helped me move apartments 3 different times. He had driven 6 hours just to surprise me on my birthday after my grandfather passed away. Through every major moment of my adult life, Noah had been there without asking for anything in return. And now I was the one pulling away because of something I could not even remember. The following Tuesday, I passed his apartment building on my drive home and instinctively slowed down. His living room lights were on. Through the window, I could see him packing books into cardboard boxes. There were at least 6 stacked near the front door. For a moment, I wondered whether he was simply reorganizing. Then I noticed the moving company logo printed across the side of one of the boxes. My stomach tightened. Noah had not mentioned moving. Not once. I sat at the traffic light staring at the apartment until it turned green, but even after I drove away, one question echoed louder than all the others. Had I been so consumed by my own fears that I never realized my best friend had already begun preparing to leave my life? Later that evening, Noah stood alone in his apartment, folding another stack of books into a cardboard box he was no longer sure he wanted to seal. The apartment was unusually quiet without Ethan's familiar habit of talking over whatever movie happened to be playing in the background. He picked up a faded baseball cap Ethan had forgotten months earlier and smiled to himself before placing it carefully on the bookshelf instead of inside the box. His phone buzzed with another message from Tyler. Did Ethan ever remember anything? Noah looked at the screen for several seconds before replying with only 3 words. Not a single thing. Tyler answered almost immediately. Are you ever going to tell him? Noah slipped the phone back into his pocket without responding. His mind drifted unwillingly to that Saturday night. The party had been loud, crowded, and cheerful until Ethan quietly disappeared from the backyard. Noah had found him sitting alone on the front steps, staring at the driveway with glassy eyes. Ethan had tried to stand, taken 2 unsteady steps, then apologized to a decorative mailbox because he believed it belonged to an elderly neighbor. Noah had laughed softly, thanked the homeowner for understanding, and guided Ethan toward his car. During the drive, Ethan had struggled to keep his eyes open. He had mumbled disconnected stories from college, asked whether they had missed a movie they had watched years earlier, and repeatedly insisted that he was perfectly capable of walking home even though he had already forgotten where they had parked. Once they reached the apartment building, Noah wrapped one steady arm around Ethan's shoulders and slowly helped him upstairs. Ethan's shirt had been stained with spilled soda and barbecue sauce from the party, so Noah quietly handed him a clean t-shirt and a pair of comfortable sweatpants from the guest drawer while looking away to give him as much privacy as possible. When Ethan became too dizzy to manage on his own, Noah simply helped pass him the clean clothes without lingering and without making the awkward moment any more embarrassing than it already was. Afterward, he brought a glass of water, headache medicine, and a small trash can beside the bed just in case the nausea returned during the night. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, Ethan woke briefly, shivering despite the warm summer air. Noah placed a light blanket over him and rested a cool towel across his forehead because he felt warmer than usual. Ethan never fully opened his eyes. He only whispered, almost like a frightened child caught inside a dream, "Please, do not leave me like everyone else." Noah felt his chest tighten. He answered with the same calm voice he had used countless times over the years. "I am right here." Within seconds, Ethan had fallen asleep again. Noah remained sitting beside the bed for another half hour to make sure his breathing stayed steady before quietly turning off the bedside lamp. Rather than taking the bed himself, he stretched out on the living room sofa with a spare blanket, setting an alarm every 90 minutes so he could check that Ethan was still resting comfortably. By sunrise, Noah had already started making tea and breakfast, hoping the morning would spare Ethan the humiliation of remembering how vulnerable he had been. That was the only secret Noah had chosen to keep. Not because anything inappropriate had happened, but because he believed some moments deserved protection instead of explanation. If Ethan eventually remembered on his own, Noah would answer every question honestly. Until then, he would rather let his closest friend think he had simply been stubbornly quiet than force him to relive a night that had revealed how deeply he feared being abandoned. The image of those moving boxes refused to leave my mind. For the next several days, every ordinary moment seemed to carry an invisible question behind it. Noah still replied whenever I texted him, but our conversations had become careful, almost rehearsed. We no longer lingered on the phone until midnight debating movies or arguing over which baseball team had the better season ahead. Instead, we exchanged simple messages about work, the weather, or whether one of us had remembered to pay a shared streaming subscription. It felt as though we were protecting something fragile without ever admitting it had been broken. Late Thursday afternoon, Olivia stopped by my desk after a meeting. "Are you coming to dinner tomorrow?" she asked. "What dinner?" She looked surprised. "Tyler is taking Noah out before he leaves." I stared at her. "Before he leaves where?" Her expression immediately changed. "Wait, he did not tell you?" I slowly shook my head. Olivia looked genuinely uncomfortable. "I thought you knew. He accepted a position in Seattle. He starts next month." For a moment, I forgot every sound around me. The office faded into a blur of ringing phones and distant conversations. "Seattle?" I repeated quietly. "He has been interviewing for months," Olivia said. "He finally accepted last week." Months. While I had been worrying about memories I could not recover, Noah had apparently been planning an entirely new life. That evening, I drove home without turning on the radio. Every red light gave me another chance to think about all the moments I had ignored. The unopened boxes, the shorter conversations, the invitations that had quietly stopped. None of it had happened overnight. I had simply been too distracted to notice. I pulled into my apartment parking lot, but never got out of the car. Instead, I scrolled through years of photos on my phone. There we were at a national park, grinning beside a hiking trail after getting caught in unexpected rain. There we were celebrating my promotion with oversized slices of pizza because neither of us felt like dressing up for an expensive restaurant. There was Noah helping my father assemble new patio furniture one summer afternoon, laughing so hard he almost dropped the instruction manual. Every picture reminded me of something I had taken for granted. Noah had somehow become woven into every chapter of my adult life so gradually that I had stopped noticing how much space he occupied. The next morning, Tyler called before I even reached the office. "You are still coming tonight, right?" he asked. "I guess so." He was quiet for a second. "You sound terrible. Did you know about Seattle?" "Yeah." Another pause. "He wanted to tell you himself." "When?" I asked. Tyler sighed. "Probably before everything became awkward." That single word settled heavily inside me. Awkward. Was that really what this had become? Not anger. Not betrayal. Just two lifelong friends trapped inside a misunderstanding neither of them seemed willing to confront. After work, I found myself parked outside Noah's apartment once again. This time I did not stay in the car. I walked up the familiar stairs, stopping outside his door with my hand raised to knock. I could hear faint music playing inside and the sound of packing tape being pulled across another cardboard box. My fist hovered only inches from the wood, but doubt stopped me. What if I was already too late? What if Noah had decided that giving me distance was easier than waiting for me to trust him again? I stood there for nearly a full minute before lowering my hand and quietly walking back toward the parking lot, carrying home the sinking feeling that sometimes the hardest conversations are the ones we convince ourselves can wait until tomorrow. The farewell dinner was supposed to feel like a celebration, but the moment I walked into the restaurant, I knew I was the only person who had not been prepared for what was happening. Everyone greeted Noah with excited questions about Seattle, new coworkers, and apartment hunting. They laughed about road trips they wanted to take once he got settled. I sat quietly at the end of the table, realizing just how far behind everyone else I had fallen. Noah caught my eye more than once and smiled the same warm smile he always had, but there was something different about it now. It looked peaceful, almost like someone who had already accepted an ending. Halfway through dinner, Tyler leaned across the table. "Ethan, can you help me grab the cake from my car?" I followed him outside without thinking. As soon as the restaurant door closed behind us, he stopped walking. "There is no cake," he admitted. "I just needed to talk to you." I folded my arms. "About Noah?" Tyler nodded. "About the fact that both of you are making this harder than it has to be." "I do not know what you mean." Tyler looked at me with the kind of expression only an old friend could manage. "Yes, you do." He unlocked his phone and scrolled through several videos from Olivia's birthday party. "I have been holding on to these because Noah asked everyone not to embarrass you." He handed me the phone. The first clip showed people dancing in the backyard. I appeared for only a few seconds before wandering out of frame with a paper cup in my hand. Tyler skipped to another video. This one had been recorded near the driveway. My chest tightened as I watched myself swaying unsteadily, while Noah gently supported me with one hand on my shoulder. There was no drama, no secret, no hidden moment. Noah simply stayed beside me while everyone else cleaned up after the party. Tyler pressed play on one final recording. The camera had accidentally kept rolling after someone forgot to stop recording. The quality was shaky, but the voices were perfectly clear. I heard myself say, almost slurring the words, "Everybody leaves eventually." Then I looked directly at Noah and asked, "You are not going to disappear too, right?" The screen showed Noah answering without hesitation, "No, I am getting you home first." The recording continued inside the apartment building lobby. Noah patiently waited while I struggled to remember which floor button to press even, though we had visited his apartment hundreds of times before. Then the video ended. I stared at the blank screen, unable to speak. "That is all there was," Tyler said quietly. "Noah drove you home, helped you upstairs, made sure you drank water, and stayed awake checking on you because you were sick from drinking too much. He even slept on his couch." I swallowed hard. Why did nobody tell me? Tyler let out a slow breath. "Because Noah asked us not to. He said you would already feel embarrassed enough when you realized how much you drank. He wanted you to remember your dignity, not your worst night." Every assumption I had carried for the past several weeks collapsed at once. I had questioned the one person who had quietly protected me without asking for credit. I remembered the untouched breakfast, the charged phone, the neatly folded jacket, the patient silence, and every moment I had mistaken kindness for secrecy. Looking back now, the truth had been there from the beginning. I had simply been too afraid of what I might have forgotten to recognize what Noah had actually done. For the first time since waking up in his apartment, I was no longer searching for a missing memory. I was searching for the right words to apologize before the chance disappeared with him. I did not wait for dessert. I barely remembered saying goodbye to anyone before I hurried out of the restaurant with my keys still clutched tightly in my hand. Every traffic light on the drive to Noah's apartment felt impossibly long. The closer I got, the more I replayed every conversation we had shared over the past few weeks. Every time he had offered me lunch. Every quiet smile. Every chance I had ignored because I had been trapped inside my own fears. By the time I reached his building, I already knew the apology I had practiced during the drive would never be enough. The hallway outside his apartment was silent except for the faint sound of cardboard being moved across the floor. I knocked once. A few seconds later, the door opened. Noah looked genuinely surprised to see me standing there. "Ethan," he said softly. "Everything okay?" I looked past him. More boxes were stacked against the wall. Now, the living room shelves were half empty, and several framed photographs had already been wrapped in protective paper. Somehow the apartment already felt less like home. "Can we talk?" I asked. Noah stepped aside without hesitation. "Of course." We sat across from each other at the kitchen table where he had made breakfast for me only weeks earlier. Neither of us spoke for several moments. Finally, I took a slow breath. Tyler showed me the videos. Noah lowered his eyes to the mug in his hands, but said nothing. I know what really happened that night. Another long silence settled between us before Noah nodded once. I figured someone eventually would. "Why did you never tell me?" I asked quietly. He gave a tired smile that carried more sadness than humor. "Because every time you looked at me after that morning, I could tell you were trying to put the pieces together yourself. You could have explained. Would you have believed me?" His question landed harder than I expected. I opened my mouth, but no answer came. Back then I probably would have kept searching for hidden meanings, no matter what he said. Noah gently folded his hands together on the table. "You were embarrassed before you even knew what happened," he said. If I had started describing every detail, it would have sounded like I was defending myself against an accusation you never actually made. I stared at the tabletop. He was right. I had spent weeks inventing questions instead of asking them. Noah continued speaking in the same calm voice I had known for years. The only thing I chose not to tell you was what you said before you fell asleep. I looked up. You kept asking people not to leave you. You were exhausted, emotional, and completely overwhelmed. I did not think you would want to wake up and carry that memory around. My chest tightened. So you protected me. Noah gave the smallest shrug. I took care of my best friend. There was no dramatic speech. No attempt to make himself look noble. He spoke as though it had been the most ordinary decision in the world. I felt ashamed of how many conclusions I had reached without trusting the person who had earned that trust over 7 years. I am sorry, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I kept pulling away because I thought there was something you were not telling me. I never stopped to realize you were only trying to spare me. Noah looked at me for a long moment before offering a gentle smile that looked almost identical to the one he had given me the morning I woke up in his apartment. I never blamed you, Ethan, he said quietly. Memory is a strange thing. Fear is even stranger. I shook my head. You still should have been angry. He smiled a little wider this time. Maybe, but losing one difficult conversation felt a lot less important than losing you. Those words settled between us in complete silence, and for the first time in weeks, neither of us looked away. Neither of us noticed how much time had passed until the tea in our mugs had gone completely cold. The apartment no longer felt heavy with unspoken questions. Instead, it felt strangely peaceful, as though the silence finally had room to breathe. I looked around at the half-packed boxes and realized I had spent weeks fearing memories that never existed while ignoring a future that was quietly slipping away. When were you going to tell me about Seattle? I asked. Noah leaned back in his chair and let out a slow breath. I wanted to tell you before the party, he admitted. Then everything became complicated. After that, it never seemed like the right moment. So you decided to leave without saying much? He smiled sadly. I decided not to make it harder for either of us. That answer hurt more than I expected. You really thought I would just let you disappear? Noah looked at me with the same calm expression he always carried. I thought maybe you needed some distance. I did not want to stand in the way if that was what you wanted. I shook my head immediately. That was never what I wanted. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Noah laughed quietly to himself. You know something funny? He asked. 7 years ago, when we first met, I promised myself I would never let my feelings ruin our friendship. I looked up. Your feelings? He nodded once. I liked you almost from the beginning. The words were spoken so gently that they did not feel like a confession. They felt like the simple truth he had been carrying for years. Before I could respond, he continued. You were always kind to me. You treated me like everyone else. You never made me feel different after I came out. That meant more than you probably realized. I listened without interrupting. There was no expectation in his voice, no attempt to change anything between us. I also knew you thought of me as your best friend, he said. That was enough. I never wanted you to feel uncomfortable around me, so I kept those feelings where they belonged. I thought back through years of memories that suddenly looked different. Every birthday he never forgot. Every long drive he volunteered to make. Every difficult season of my life, when he somehow showed up before I even asked. None of those moments had been grand romantic gestures. They had simply been quiet acts of care, repeated so consistently that I had accepted them as ordinary. And that night, I asked softly. Noah answered without hesitation. That night changed nothing. He met my eyes with complete sincerity. You trusted me enough to let me help you, even if you do not remember it. I was never going to take advantage of that trust. If my feelings ever mattered more than your dignity, then they were not worth having. I felt something inside me shift in a way I could not explain. For weeks I had been trying to solve the mystery of a missing memory. Now I understood that the real story had never been about one forgotten night. It had been about one man quietly choosing respect over opportunity, patience over confession, and friendship over his own wishes. I reached across the table without thinking and rested my hand gently over his. He looked surprised but did not pull away. I have spent weeks wondering what happened while I was asleep, I said. Now I think I finally understand what happened while I was awake all these years. Noah searched my face as though trying to decide whether he had heard me correctly, and for the first time since this strange journey began, I found myself seeing my oldest friend through completely new eyes. 3 months later, Seattle was no longer part of the plan. Noah had turned down the transfer only a week after our conversation, choosing instead to accept a similar position with the same company in our city. He never made it sound like a sacrifice. When I asked why, he simply smiled and said that sometimes the life you are searching for has been beside you all along. We never rushed to define what we had become. There was no dramatic confession, no unforgettable kiss in the rain, and no grand announcement to our friends. Instead, we did what we had always done. We had lunch together every Monday. We watched baseball games on Friday nights. We argued about movies, ordered too much takeout, and laughed over the same inside jokes that somehow never became old. The only difference was that I finally paid attention to the little things I had overlooked for years. I noticed the extra cup of coffee waiting on my desk before an early meeting. I noticed how Noah always remembered my mother's birthday because he knew I sometimes forgot to call before dinner. I noticed the way he quietly carried the heavier grocery bags without making a point of it, or how he automatically saved the last slice of pizza because he knew it was my favorite. Those moments had always been there. I had simply mistaken consistency for ordinary friendship. One Saturday afternoon, we decided to cook dinner instead of ordering food. The kitchen quickly became a disaster. I managed to spill pasta across the floor while Noah insisted that reading instructions was completely optional. We laughed until we could barely stand, then finally sat down with two uneven plates that looked nothing like the recipe photo. Somehow it was one of the best meals I could remember. After dinner, we settled onto the couch with a movie neither of us had actually planned to watch. About halfway through, I realized I had stopped paying attention to the screen. Noah was quietly focused on the story, completely unaware that I was watching him instead. There was something comforting about the way he simply existed. Nothing forced, nothing expected, just the same steady person who had been there through every season of my life. I thought about the morning I had woken up confused and frightened, convinced that the missing pieces of one night held all the answers. I smiled to myself. The truth had never been hidden inside forgotten hours. It had been written across 7 years of patience, kindness, and quiet choices that I had never fully seen until I almost lost them. Without saying anything, I reached over and gently took Noah's hand. He looked at me with a surprised smile, then intertwined his fingers with mine as naturally as if they had always belonged there. Neither of us spoke. We did not need to. The movie continued playing. Dinner dishes still waited in the sink, and the city lights slowly appeared beyond the living room window. For the first time in a long while, I did not feel the need to search for answers or replay old questions. I remembered everything that truly mattered. I remembered who had stayed. I remembered who had quietly protected my dignity when I could not protect it myself. Most of all, I remembered that the strongest kind of love is not built in a single unforgettable night. It is built through countless ordinary days when someone chooses, again and again, to remain by your side. As the credits rolled across the television, I gave Noah's hand a gentle squeeze. He smiled back without looking away for long, then asked whether I wanted popcorn before the next movie. I laughed, stood up with him, and together we walked into the kitchen, already talking about tomorrow, next weekend, and all the ordinary moments that now felt like the beginning of an extraordinary future.